Hey everybody, welcome back. Remember a couple of months ago I did maybe a month ago, I did an estimated height and weight on the girls, and Jean was 16'1" and 1,250 pounds, and Grace here was 16 and about 1,200 pounds. So they've still got another 700 pounds or so to put on. They're 21 months now. So they got about another 700 pounds or so to put on, and they got to really start filling out. They got about 4 more inches in height to grow. They're doing really, really good. So in March, they're going to be 2, and I'll be able to start training them lightly. You know, I've already been putting the collars on them, and I've been putting the harnesses on them, getting them used to that, but I can start ground driving them. But it's kind of hard to ground drive them when they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the cues, and they don't understand the tension that you're putting on the lines and all that. So you really need a teacher to show them the ropes and show them how to do that. So I ended up going out and getting a new Percheron to teach the girls how to drive for the next year. So this is Jewel. She's fresh off an Amish farm. She's 16 years old, and she's a really well-trained mare, really sweet disposition. She's got such a kind eye. She's got a dock tail, but you know, that's Amish tradition, and you can't show a draft without having a dock tail, so they just go ahead and dock them. She's got a scald mark right there from where the harness didn't fit her correctly, but she's in really good nick other than that. She's got a scald mark on her where the bridle and the bridle and the halter right on the bridge of her nose. You can see it there. And her hooves, she needs some maintenance on her hooves, but she's a really sweet girl. She got the kindest eyes. Look at those eyes. She's just absolutely stunning. Her mane, that's about all there is to her mane, because she's been worked her whole life. So she's that mane has been worn off with the halter fitting right here. The collar fitting right here, and then the lines and everything dragging up here on her mane. But let me stand next to her so you can see how big she is. So I've got a current Coggins on her, but I don't know what her current vaccination status is. So I'm gonna load her back up on the trailer. We're gonna run 15 minutes down the road, go see the vet, go ahead and get a full vaccination on her. When in doubt, vaccinate. I feel like she's probably been vaccinated, but I'm not taking any chances, and for $150 to vaccinate, it's well worth it. And they'll do a stool sample as well. She had really good looking stools, but since she's been here, I've only had her for 36 hours. I went to north of Fort Worth to pick her up. I left Monday after Christmas at 11 a.m. and I got back here Wednesday morning at 3:30 in the morning. And 17-hour trip, and I went by myself, of course, because nobody does anything with me. She was tired when we got back, so I put her in Chief's stall. Joy over here was yelling at her at the top of her lungs. She wanted her to come out and play, and it was echoing all through the woods. I'm surprised the neighbors didn't turn on all their lights and want to know what all the racket was, but she didn't wake anybody up. But David and Jessica are who I got her from out in Texas, really nice people. And then Grace was out in the barn, the girl in the barn. So it was David, Jessica, and Grace. I thought that was pretty funny. But she's a really sweet girl. You see, she's just standing there tied up. So like I said, we're gonna load her up on the trailer, run her down there, get her vaccinated. The farrier will be out here in 2 weeks. Her feet are in pretty good order. She got a crack there, and her feet are flared out pretty bad at the base. And I think she was probably barefoot for a while. But this back hoof back here, she had a blowout on it. And if you look right there, David said that she had an abscess, and the abscess blew out, and it blew out the front of the sidewall. Or I'm sorry, the front of the hoof wall. But he said it's old, and it's just growing out. But she's favoring that leg right now because she's got scratches. Scratches is back here, and it's a skin disorder, dermatitis issue. And you can actually see right here. And you have to treat it with an antimicrobial soap and betadine, and then keep some antibiotics on it, some topical antibiotics. So I'm going to get some of that from the vet over here. But any horse can get scratches, but it's typically in horses that have a lot of feathers. All of this hair down here is called feathers, and it's really prevalent in Clydesdales and Shires. The Percherons have less feathers than any of the drafts, but it's typically on the back legs. And what happens is they get wet in the morning dew, or they get wet in the rain, and these feathers stay wet. And when those feathers stay wet, it's just super hot, and it's just humid up underneath all these feathers, and it's just a breeding ground for microbials. Yeah, she's got it here on this foot as well. You can see it right there. So it's just a dermatitis skin disorder, but it can be treated. It just hasn't been treated. I've seen it on 3 black Percherons before, and it's always on the back feet. Typically don't get it on the front for some reason. Not sure why, but you see how sweet she is. I know, I'm right here, baby. She doesn't have any, she's super alert. She doesn't have any runny nose, any discharge out of her eyes. She's not wheezing in her breath. You don't hear anything in her lungs. And she's just a big old fat, healthy girl. If you look at her from the back, she's got really good composition. Other than that scald mark on her back right hip. But if you look right here, you can see she's nice and thick. Step up, step up.
Hey, I'm Dr. Zoe from Countryside. This is Jewel. Isn't this Jewel? That's right. We're vaccinating her today. We're vaccinating her for rabies, EWT, and West Nile. So EW stands for Eastern and Western encephalomyelitis, and then T stands for tetanus, and she's also getting a West Nile vaccine and a flu rhino vaccination, and as well as her strangles vaccine. So all of them are intramuscular injections except for the strangles vaccine, which we use an intranasal product for. But yeah, they're all just muscular shots. So we have them here. I do one on this side. We just tent the skin, pull back. Always make sure there's no blood. And that's it for that one. Then we'll come to this side. And we like to do the flu rhino on the right.
And what is flu rhino?
So flu is influenza, and then rhino is actually the herpes virus.
Okay.
There's 2 different forms. There's EHV1 and EHV4. So it's a nasty disease, and it's usually neurologic symptoms mixed with some respiratory symptoms. So we don't want that in our herds for sure.
And then West Nile, they would get that from a infected mosquito that possibly
Yes.
bit an infected animal previously?
Yes, yep, exactly. So West Nile and so sweet. Yeah, your flu rhino gets transferred from horse to horse, whereas West Nile and your Eastern and Western are transferred through mosquitoes. So we don't want them. Mosquito season around here is 11 months out of the year, so we don't want them getting any of those. And yes, the mosquitoes would bite an infected animal, and then they act as a vector traveling to your farm and can infect your horses, which is also why here in the Southeast, not so true necessarily for the rest of the United States, but definitely here in the Southeast, because we have mosquitoes for basically all year round, we recommend vaccinating twice a year for certain vaccines to help keep their immune system very strongly protected. So.
And then the ECT is what?
The EWT.
EWT.
Yeah, the EWT is Eastern, and the E stands for Eastern, the W stands for Western, and the T stands for tetanus. And
so Eastern and Western would be what?
The Eastern and Western are both also neurologic diseases. So there's actually also a Venezuelan, but we don't have that here. But yeah, they are encephalomyelitis.
Okay, and now we're going to do the strangles, and strangles does what?
So strangles is a strep, and it's transferred also from horse to horse, and it's basically like getting a really severe strep throat, but in a horse. They get a snotty nose, can have a cough, and then they'll get really big swollen lymph nodes, usually in and around the face, usually around the throat latch area. If the lymph nodes get really large, they will bust abscesses out in those spots, and also it's called strangles because if the lymph nodes get really big, they can actually close off the airway and suffocate them. So we don't want it to get that severe, but not everyone vaccinates for strangles. However, because you have to weigh out your risks, your pros and your cons. If you have a horse that's traveling frequently to really big horse shows or is around a lot of horses all the time, it's probably, I would probably put it on your list of vaccinations, but if your horse just hangs out at home and doesn't really go anywhere, your risk of getting strangles is quite low, and so I probably wouldn't encourage it in that instance because you have to get it from a sick horse. So.
And now Coggins, she's not getting her Coggins because she already has a current Coggins, but we do Coggins annually. But what is Coggins?
So Coggins is actually named after a guy with the last name Coggins. It's not the actual disease that we're testing for. The Coggins is just the name of the test, but we're testing for equine infectious anemia, which is also a mosquito vectored disease. So it's eradicated here in the United States for the most part. It's extremely rare to get a positive Coggins test, thank goodness, these days. But it's basically an incurable disease, in which case your horse is going to become increasingly more anemic and more sick. And if you do come positive for it, and it's a blood test. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that. It's a blood test, so it's not a Coggins is not a vaccination. It's actually a blood sample that we take. And but yeah, if your horse does come positive, back with a positive Coggins test, it is basically you have two options. You can either isolate the horse for the rest of its life away from all other equid species, or you can humanely euthanize. So those are the options.
So there's not, we're testing for it, but the test is good for a year. But what if they contract it 3 months down the road? I mean, we don't know that.
That is one of the arguments, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is possible.
So it's like taking a COVID test today, I'm negative, but it doesn't mean I'm going to be negative next month.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
The Coggins test is negative at the time the blood was drawn. Anytime after that, we don't know. So technically, a Coggins test
is only
is a
good at
view
the time
of the previous year, not of the upcoming year.
Right,
So
right.
But there's no other
Because
really
if
way
we
to do it.
if we go to a show or we go to a barn or we go on a trail ride in a public area, they want you to have a negative Coggins, but that negative Coggins could be 10 months old.
Yep.
Okay.
That is also kind of where your health certificates come into play somewhat. If you're really early into like EIA, they can have very little symptoms. that's where maybe a health certificate can come in, because when they're more advanced disease, they look quite ill.
Explain what a health certificate is to
So a
those
health
that don't know.
certificate is an examination by a veterinarian certifying that the horse is in good health at the time of the exam. A lot of places, a lot of big shows, and like especially if you're traveling across state lines, for example, you've got to show proof of health certificate, basically certifying that a veterinarian has looked at this animal and has said that it's free of contagious disease. And that's basically what a health certificate is looking for. So a health certificate is not necessarily a certificate of my horse is in 100% health. It's actually more focused on contagious disease, because it's focusing on the spread of disease. So if your horse has a chronic illness that's not contagious, you can still obtain a health certificate. No, but we would just write on there at the bottom, like, horse is known to have this and that, but it's not contagious, so therefore the horse can move along. So.
Okay, and earlier before I came, I told the viewers that we most probably had scratches on her, and I explained briefly what scratches was, but it was my version of it. Can you explain exactly what scratches is and what you've told me to do about it?
Yep, so scratches is super common. It's a skin irritation / infection, and it's very common in these fuzzy-footed creatures here, and it's caused by being too wet most of the time. Mud or water, dew on the grass, anything like that. It's from staying too wet too often, and the really fuzzy hair like that keeps the moisture against the skin and will cause it to break out in this infection. And so the best thing to do is to clean and dry. So with that, I usually like to use some liquid, dish soap. Sometimes most of the time I do Palmolive, the green, just plain Jane, and I will mix it with just a touch of some betadine and dilute it a little bit with some water and use that, and really work it into, I use warm water first on the legs and get the scabs nice and wet, and then work through with the soap with my fingernails, and you've got to get all the scabs off and the soap underneath the scabs. And then I usually, once I feel confident that I've gotten all the scabs off, I let the soap sit for another 5 minutes, and then I rinse very, very thoroughly. You've got to get every little bit of the soap off, and then dry, like towel and dry, followed up by just some light hair drying, but be very careful not to burn her skin, because if you've gotten the hair dryer too close to your scalp, you can tell it gets pretty hot pretty quick. So just or just even a blower, like if you have ever seen anybody use it, they use it at cow shows a lot, like an actual blower, and people will use it on horses too to get dust out of their coat. That works really, really well because it's not heat based, so that's actually a good option too.
And we're gonna do that, I'm gonna do that once a week, not more than once a week.
Correct, yeah. You don't want to overbathe the legs, because you can create the opposite problem where now your skin is dry and cracking, and then you can get infection in the cracked skin. So the skin has a natural oil barrier, and we want to protect that. We want to get the bad bacteria and fungus and all the nastiness, the scabs, out of there so that the healthy skin can come in. But we don't want to hurt the brand new healthy skin, so you don't want to overbathe or in the beginning you are going to cause some bleeding, and a little bit of trauma to the skin, just trying to get those scabs off of there. But hopefully, over the next couple of weeks, the more you work at it, you will have more and more healthy skin, and then we don't want to traumatize that skin by over drying it. So.
And then lastly, before you give her strangles, you looked at her mouth, and she does need her teeth floated. And what exactly is floating the teeth? So
floating their teeth, horses throughout their entire lives, their teeth continuously grow. And the way that they chew can create points in certain areas of the mouth if they're not chewing perfectly symmetrical, and they don't, or maybe they have some dental issues, or they can get sharp points forming typically along their cheeks and then along their tongue, and that can be quite painful. It can cause them to drop their food when they're eating, or have some ulcers in their mouth where the sharp points are rubbing can cause some discomfort when you bridle them. You know, they can have some resistance there. So, and then even more severe things, if their teeth get really bad, they can crack them, they can become loose or diseased. Or
Is it true that they don't get all of the nutrients out of the food because they're not chewing it as thoroughly, or is that a...
I would say there's some truth to that for sure. You know, if you think about it, if those sharp points, so say this is your bottom jaw and this is your top jaw, if they fit like this onto each other, if you have really sharp points on the top, it's going to decrease your ability to chew the food completely because you're going to be limited in your motion. And so certainly you could imagine that if they weren't grinding the food completely, you know, that they're going to have decreased digestion later down the system. So I would say that, yeah, that's probably.
So next month is dental month, so we're gonna wait to float her teeth in February because there's a 15% discount. So we're gonna, yeah. Zoe's probably gonna come back out for a visit to the farm, or we'll come back to her practice. And one more thing, and then you'll be done, is explain what your capabilities are here and what you have on staff as far as vets and that type of stuff, because most vets are mobile and come to you, mm-hmm. and then when it gets out of their spectrum, they have to send you over to the University of Georgia, mm-hmm. and then you're dealing with people you don't know and trying to get in their schedule and their rotation, and it's so nice that you guys are a full-on service. So
yeah, there are a few things that we still don't do here. They're a little bit out of our expertise range, but certainly we are fully capable of doing you know, complete health exams, pre-purchase exams, anything from basic vaccines, teeth, Coggins, you know, hoof care, diet, anything like that. We have blood work machines here, to some of your more complicated disease processes, like, you know, we have ultrasounds and x-rays, and we have a gastroscope and an upper airway endoscope, and we have a laser for chronic wounds. We have shockwave therapy. What else do we have?
Can we do surgical here or no?
Oh yeah, we do lots of surgeries, mostly elective surgeries, sometimes emergency surgeries, but we do not do colic surgery or house kind of intensive colics because they require 24/7, you know, somebody always like keeping an eye on them, and we don't have quite the manpower for that just yet, but
you have boarding here to leave a sick horse?
Yeah, we do. As long as the horse is not contagious. We don't like to house things that are contagious because people are in and out of here all the time.
Now, how many stalls do you have for sickly?
8. I think we have 8. Oh wait, 10. Technically 10, yeah.
Because we have 2 inside.
Yeah, and we are actually, next year, we're hoping to have it completed by September, but they're building a whole brand new equine facility right next door. And it's gonna have like a covered lameness area. We're gonna have a surgical suite, a whole reproductive suite area. There's gonna be a CT, maybe an MRI eventually. It's gonna be pretty awesome. So
and you're one of the vets here, but you're not the only vet.
Correct. Yes, there are 4 of us. Yep. Dr. Dan Carter, he owns the practice. And then there's Dr. Sam Ader and myself, Zoe Latimer, and then we have Caroline Brown.
But that is only on the equine side. Then you have a whole small animal side.
Yes, we have 3 doctors over on the small animal side. We have Dr. Fuller, who most people usually ask about him because he's been here for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 30 years, maybe longer. But everybody and their brother knows who Dr. Fuller is, but he's over on the small animal side. And then we have Dr. Childers and Dr. Cobal. And they're great.
So we took a stool sample. She graciously gave us one, and we're going to test that for worms, or what?
Yep. So
for worms.
Not actual worms, but they're eggs.
Okay.
Worms live
and you're
inside
going
the
to
body
test
and shed eggs through the feces.
And you're going to test that here?
Yep. We actually have a machine right there, that brand new machine is our automatic fecal reading machine. So.
And if we have eggs, what do we do?
We will deworm her with, depending on what eggs are present, we will pick the dewormer. And we typically, so with imagining that in a perfect world, somebody would vaccinate their horse twice a year, we have vaccine packages, you know, for their yearly shots and then their booster shots. And also included in that package is a full exam, you know, talking to the owner about any questions, that's all included, and then the actual vaccines themselves, and then it comes with a fecal. So each horse in a perfect world would get a fecal twice a year to make sure that we're in the clear. If the egg count is really low, then there's no need to deworm them and they can continue on, and then we'll check them again in 6 months.
And how do we deworm them?
We have lots of great commercially available oral paste dewormers now in this day and age. It's
so
nice.
They're just injected right into the mouth?
Yep, it's just a paste, and it comes in a tube with a plunger, and you squirt it right in, and most of them don't taste too terrible, but in the olden days they used to have to tube horses to deworm them, and luckily we don't have to do that anymore, so count your blessings.
All right, so this is the poop tester, and Savannah is going to explain to us what we're doing. This is what we're checking for eggs in the poop.
This is our fancy little machine here, so I'm gonna grab one of these right here. So this is what the poop is actually gonna go on in just a second once we fix it. So for this test is gonna check for strongyles and ascarids. So we're gonna take our poop sample right here. Oh, a little too much. It's all right.
What did you say we're testing for, and what is it?
This is eggs in the poop, so worm eggs. Yeah.
Well, the technical term she used, or the scientific term.
Oh, you're talking about like strongyles?
Yeah, that. She said strongles, and something else.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, once we have the mix together, we can squeeze this bad boy right here, and it's gonna give us a little sample, pre-measured, just enough, and we can put it right here on top. And then we are gonna run the test for the equine there, and it'll take just a few minutes for that to settle in.
What is a few minutes?
A few minutes.
3?
4 minutes?
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 for this process.
And is it disposing it or processing it and dropping it
It
into
is.
here?
So it's processing it. It's actually fixating it to the film that's right there in the bottom.
Okay.
And then we'll take it from here and we'll insert it into this little machine. And it will send the image directly onto this tablet and give us the numbers that we need.
So the image is numbers. It's not like looking through a microscope like the...
It actually will give us the image as well of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It is. It's neon and fun colors. Alrighty, so now that everything's been fixated, we are gonna take our slide over here. And it is connecting here.
And is this instantaneous, or is this
It
another...
is just capturing the image and then it'll give it right to us. And there it is.
And what are we seeing?
So right here, these are the 2 types of worm, the eggs that we're testing for, so the strongyles. So we do have 585, it's showing of those, and 0 ascarids, and Dr. Zoe over there could tell you a little bit more about those numbers.
So here in the results, there's 0 ascarids, which is good. That means he doesn't have any roundworms. But our strongyles here are 585, which, so we say less than 200 is low, 200 to 400 is middle of the road, and then over 400, we usually try to treat those. So for this horse, since her strongyles are somewhat high or in the treatable range, we'll probably recommend at this time of year, probably some Equimax. Yep, or Zymectrin Gold, either way.
So we can do that now?
We do not carry dewormers because they're so commercially available. You can get them from anywhere. It takes up a lot of room on our shelves, and so.
So just run down to Tractor Supply and get a
Exactly.
tube and shoot it in her mouth.
Mm-hmm. You actually might have to get 2 tubes because she's a big girl. She's what, 1750? And most tubes only go up to 1500, I think. Some of them only 1250, but you have to look on there. It'll show you. It'll tell you like weight-wise. So
Okay.
you may have to give her a tube and then a partial, and then you can save the other part of the tube for one of your other horses or something.
All right, well, good. Thank you very much. You guys see now why I love Dr. Zoe so much. But we're gonna do her strangles now, and you're gonna see she's gonna look like a buck in rut because she's gonna curl her upper lip and look straight up at the sky. They typically don't like this too much, but they've got a bay door. You can just park right here, right outside, come underneath the cover here and go right into the clinic. And then their barn is right down here with the other stalls in it and some paddocks there, and then out back there's paddocks. And they've got a scale down there in the barn. And we took her and weighed her, and she weighed 1,750 pounds.
Yeah.
Did I miss it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to film it?
I missed it. But anyway, Zoe just shot this tube up her nose.
Yep, just like that.
She did.
Get that away from me.
Yep.
That's all it was. I'm
Oh, there it comes. That's it.
All right, guys, we're gonna load her back up and we'll see you back at the farm. Back at the farm, we're gonna get her off the trailer. I'm gonna put her in paddock 1. I had her in paddock 3 last night. Only had her about 36 hours, and I had her in paddock 3 last night because it's the quietest paddock and it's off the road, but the water trough back there won't hold water. So I'm gonna put her in paddock 1 so she's got access to water. And I'm gonna have to take her and lead her all the way around the perimeter of the paddock to show her where the fences are so that she doesn't start running and, you know, slam on the brakes and run through a fence. So let me get her off the trailer. I'm gonna walk her around, show her where the water is. I'll bring her hay out of paddock 3 and put it out here in paddock 1. But that was really interesting going to see Dr. Zoe. I was there for about 2 hours. Good girl. I was there about 2 hours, and it was $155. That was the vet exam and all the vaccines. It did not include, and the fecal sample. It did not include strangles. Strangles was an additional $50. Easy. Strangles was an additional $50, so it was $205 bill. And I got a wealth of information from her, and I can buy those vaccines online and do that stuff myself, but it doesn't come with the knowledge that you get from talking to Zoe. So we're just walking the perimeter of the fence right now, just so she knows where it is. Well, she's shaking. Come on. Just so she knows where the fence is. Sun's about to go down and she's not going to be able to see it. So I want her to know where it is, know what her limits are, where she can and can't go. She's used to cars and everything already, so that's not going to be an issue. Let her smell. All right, the babies are happy she's back. They were already calling for her. She weighed 1,750 pounds over there. She's a little light, 17.1 tall. But she said once we get her teeth floated in February, and once we get her wormed and get rid of those worms that she's got, that she will, she'll put on some weight and get her on a regular diet. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. There's gonna be a lot of her coming up in the future. Looking forward to ground driving her, and then when these girls turn 24 months in March, we'll start driving them around with her, just ground driving, and then eventually we'll get over to the forecart. So we'll see you next week, and as always, guys, remember who you are, be kind to those around you, stand up for what you believe in.